Mr. Stephen Shortt, how are you?
I'm doing very well, Dom. How's yourself?
I am good. I'm good. I'm really happy to be back on the line with you. As life would have it, you and I know each other from across the pond, as we say.
From many moons ago, yeah, or for
Yeah.
many moons, I suppose. We met many moons ago.
We met many moons ago.
But
And
we met on my side of the pond, the correct side of the pond.
and it starts. Well, did we though? Because I thought we met in Frankfurt in Germany.
Yeah, well, I mean that's my side of the pond. It's
Yeah, but it's not your country. It's not your country. Have you taken that country too?
No. I mean, the Irish are everywhere. I mean, if you can go 3 blocks in any direction in almost any major city in the world and find an Irish bar.
That's true. That's very true. Hey, Stephen, before we get too far into it, why don't we do this for everybody who's listening? Because I know who you are, and I'm so happy to have you here on the show as a family business expert, no less. But hey, Stephen, who the heck are you? And how do you come to be speaking to this group of forward-facing construction professionals?
You Canadians are so polite. Hi, I'm Stephen. I'm Stephen Shortt from Dublin in Ireland, the center of the known universe. And I have grown up in two family businesses. So we set up two family businesses. My parents set up two family businesses. I was like 10 when they were set up. Yeah. But over the course of the last 30 something years, I've grown up working in the family businesses, doing everything from cleaning floors, polishing brass plaques and all that kind of stuff, to marketing, to managing, to finances, to everything else. I bought one company from my folks 10 years ago, bought it 11 years ago, sold it 9 years ago, and then bought the other business 5 years ago.
So you bought two of your family businesses.
Correct. Yeah.
And sold them.
Sold one. No, I sold one, okay. Which was it was in international education. So it was reliant 100% on international travel. And I sold that business at the end of 2019. So just before the world fell on its knees. So I've been called everything from an evil genius to stuff that's far less complimentary.
Yeah. Let's loop back to that in a second, because that must have been a very interesting conversation at your dinner table when you bought a business from family and then sold it. And I'd imagine the back chatter was, what the heck is he?
So I'm the eldest. I have one sister. But that business was the third child. So convincing your parents that you needed to sell their third child, that's an interesting conversation.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we get to the core of that, because obviously it's a different perspective that you brought to the table, one of growth and change. And that's actually how you and I met, because we're both part of this business group that brought us both to Frankfurt. And you were the global chairperson of something called the GSEA, right? The Global Student Entrepreneur Awards. And I was just a regional chair of the Global Student Entrepreneur Awards.
I mean, your personality was enough to take over the room. So I mean, just is such a pejorative word, but yeah, we met through the GSEA. So my whole thing has always been about next generational stuff. So in the language school business, I used to get my biggest kicks out of the summer camps for teenagers, helping people to grow from the next generation and to see what they're going to do with the world. The GSEA was a natural thing for me as well, seeing the next generation of entrepreneurs and helping people to form their ideas and make their impact on the world. So I've always been passionate about that kind of stuff.
You know, I know that we're talking to contractors and construction professionals all around the world on this show, but let's take 2 seconds and tell them what the GSEA is, because one of their kids, one of their nieces or nephews, one of their neighbors' kids might be interested in entrepreneurship and need an outlet to find ways to promote their idea and talk to professionals like us who understand business growth. So, Stephen, since I've got you here, what is the GSEA and why would I care?
So the GSEA is the Global Student Entrepreneur Awards, and this is a support program for any university level, third level kind of student who owns and operates their own business. Doesn't have to be huge. It doesn't even have to be small, really. It just has to be a start that you're running it, you're doing it.
Yeah.
And that you're crazy enough to be studying and running your own business at the same time. And we put in place things like a lot of learning events, some mentorship, and a lot of peer-to-peer networking. So that's what the GSEA program is all about.
Yeah, love it. I've been a member of it for a number of years. I'm not in it right now, but folks, those of you listening, if you want to know more about it, go to gsea.org or pass that information on to somebody else. But Stephen, let's get back to you. So
this is why we're really here is about multi-generational stuff.
Yeah, but that does touch on it, because when you get the bug to be entrepreneurial, you've just got the bug. It's a thing,
or a psychosis, whatever way you want to look at it.
Yeah. Although I don't think the word entrepreneur existed perhaps for our parents' generation. They just, I'm going to start a company. I'm going to start a business.
Yeah. So I think it's become really sexy to be an entrepreneur. I mean, obviously, since we became entrepreneurs, the word became sexy.
Well, you and I mean, we're just cover models for that stuff.
But I think there was, for the backbone of any kind of society, small family-run businesses was the norm. You had coffee shops, small shops, manufacturing, services, anything and everything where somebody could see, wow, there's a need for that. Where can I get reliable staff? I know, I'll breed them and then make them work for me with no pay, and they can't give out to me. Otherwise, they don't eat, literally. So this whole stuff comes up. And there are businesses in Asia that are 300 years old, and the same family business. Hell, there's businesses in Ireland that are 300 years old. There's businesses in Asia that are 500 years old. So there has been a really, really long history of small family-run businesses. A lot of those family-run businesses can become bigger, and they can become these multinational behemoths, but they're still family-owned businesses. And they're also the same. The traditional kind of mom and pop 1 to 5 million kind of company where you've got family members, 1 or 2 family members, a couple of outsiders, all rowing in the same direction.
Yeah. I get my family business information largely from Europe. I think you and I have been on a couple of the family business podcasts is one I listen to a lot, just from my own personal study, listening to how people have 5-generation businesses in shoes that I've never heard of before.
Yeah.
So,
in Ireland, we have a little niche brewery you may or may not have heard of called Guinness.
Guinness. Yeah.
It's a weird kind of.
They got. I've actually seen the deed in the floor of the Guinness. Yeah, which is so forward thinking, and maybe you can explain that to people who haven't been.
So when Arthur Guinness, when he founded the Guinness Brewery, he'd grown up in brewing in what we kind of now see as the the artisan beers and stuff like that. That was really common
craft
300
beers.
years ago.
Yeah,
craft beers, and he built this massive brewery. And you've seen the lease; it is still on the showroom floor in the Guinness Enterprise, in the Guinness storehouse. And he took out a lease for 9,000 years. So he did not think in terms of monthly targets, weekly, quarterly rocks, or even annual goals or 5-year BHAG goals. He thought in terms of generations yet to come.
Yeah, fantastic. 9,000 year lease. And isn't it a penny a year or something like?
Yeah. So there somebody thought 300 years ago that their family would be making a load of money for generations yet to come based on this, but it's like a penny a year. It's a nothing. So that's huge. So they have a load of land that they can't do anything with.
Let's loop back to something that you actually started the show with, which was the realization around the table that you were going to change the business after taking it over from your parents. There's people on this show come from all sorts of everybody's situation is different. There are lots of people here who have started the business and then invited family to work with them. There are other people here who have entered into an existing family business and are in the position where they want to take over, or they're in the position to take over. Or quite frankly, Stephen, as we see very often, they're ready to take over, but it's not, you're smiling.
Not really.
It ain't going to happen. It doesn't feel like it's ever going to happen. Yeah. Prince Charles comes to mind, but I'll leave that alone.
But I'm not going to comment on that because I'm Irish.
Because you're Irish, I don't want you to. Yeah,
I don't want to get in trouble.
But that kind of situation is very real to the listeners of this show. And back to something else you said about Guinness, there are people out there who started their My Name and Sons plumbing company.
Yep.
Before their kids were born, they called it My Name and Sons.
Yeah.
And so the implication is that this is going to be a family business. So let's get to
like it or not.
like it or not, you're going to be in this business. So the reason you're on the show is not because you're a friend of mine, but because you're an expert on how to build a killer family business without killing your family.
Yeah.
So let's get to your area of expertise.
So this really all started for me. As I said, I bought the family business 11 years ago now, but really this started for me about 2-3 years before that, when I came home one January. I remember coming home in January. It was gray, it was dark, it was wet, it was cold. I did say I'm in Ireland, right?
Yeah, you didn't say Vancouver? That sounds like Vancouver and Seattle to me. Yeah.
But I remember coming home absolutely exhausted, and I mentally exhausted, physically exhausted, emotionally exhausted. And I had been arguing for weeks with my folks on, we need to invest in this kind of technology. We need to be offering these kinds of courses. We need to be doing social media marketing, not the traditional brochures and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And I remember just slumping down at my kitchen table at home, and I turned to my wife and I said out loud for the first time, I need to leave the family business, or my parents are never going to see their grandkids again, because we will never be able to be in the same fucking room again. Now, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on your podcast, but
you just did.
That I did. But that was the first time, and I had been feeling this, and I had been internalizing this for weeks and weeks and weeks, and a long, long time. And the second I said it, once I actually gave resonance to it, every cell in my body viscerally reacted that is the last thing I want. I don't want this. This is not what I want. I want to be in the family business. I want to be working with my family. I want my family to have good relationships.
Yeah.
And I knew then, okay, I got to figure something out, because I can't be the first person to have this problem. And then I started doing the research. So I've come up with this thing called the 5 P's of succession planning, whether you're in family business or not, but there are 5 P's of succession planning. It was going to be the 5 S's of succession planning, but I'm Stephen Shortt from Successful Succession. More S's into that just isn't worth.
Doesn't help. Yeah.
So now, I'm not going to tell you that I came up with these steps and then the next day, snap of a finger, and yay, we're all getting on great.
Yeah, I mean, the resistance that's built in. I mean, what do you have any sense of the conversation at your parents' dinner table? Because you're living in separate homes at the time, right? You're not all living in the same house.
No, we're all not all living in the same house. So we are having conversations about. So part of this is the first P in the 5 Ps is really what is the purpose? Like, what is the company there to do? What are we trying to build? And ideally, that's going to be for the current generation. That's going to be maybe a 5 to 10 year vision of where the company can go to. But for the next generation, that's got to be a much longer. It's got to be like a BHAG 30 year, if you're talking about thinking in terms of generations. So there's got to be alignment on that. And that's the first fundamental part. What do you want from the business, and what do I want from the business? And then how can we get those two things aligned?
How did you take me back to where that conversation started, Stephen? Because the frustration that you had with your wife, I could see you slumped on the table.
I have no frustrations with my wife. She might hear this podcast. I have no frustrations with my wife ever.
Yeah, blame Dom. That, by the way, is something people do all around the world. Blame Dom. Sorry, but I see you slumped down at the table. You're talking to your wife about the frustrations you have with the business. What do you think was going on at your parents' kitchen table at the same time?
Yeah, so I mean, I can tell you that at the time they were worried that I wasn't taking the business seriously. I was kind of, I didn't really show the same gumption and passion, because for them, I mean, let's be honest, they built that business by schlepping, getting on shitty red-eye planes, going out to different parts of the world, trying to sell the courses, trying to promote them, scrimping, saving. I haven't had to do that. I go out and I went and I did the marketing trips, and I did I've gone to Japan for 48 hours for a conference and back again. Like, I've done those kind of weird timetables, but I had a base.
Same. Yeah.
It's not the same as wondering, is the business going to be there when I get back? Like there's a lot of that. So there is a sense in the current generation, if I built this with my blood, sweat, and tears, you better be putting in the same blood, sweat, and tears. And that's absolutely fine, and they're completely legitimate for the current generation to see that, because they've poured everything into this.
Yeah.
But for me, one of the mindsets which has to shift, and the current generation has to come to terms with this, what got you here is not going to get them there. That everything that you worked on, everything that you built has been uber successful, and you are where you are because of your blood, sweat, and tears. Things have changed. I mean, how different is your business now from 10 years ago?
Yeah, exactly.
How are you marketing? What kinds of things are you marketing? What are you selling? What service? Like, so you've already adapted, but to get into that new world, a lot of the current generation, they either don't want to have it, or they just haven't grown up in it. So it's not their world, but it is the world that the next generation is going to have to compete in. So having that flexibility is key.
Yeah. It's interesting to think about. Did you have this kind of perspective? Like, did you step outside of yourself and think, when you're stressed out at your kitchen table, did you stop and think, I wonder what's going on with my parents? Like, what was the communication like, I guess, is a better question.
No, that's a really good question. At that point, no, my communication was, they're fucking idiots. They can't see what I'm seeing. Why are they being so stubborn? But once I had verbalized it and thought, we're going down a rabbit hole now where there is going to be a nuclear explosion, and everything's okay. What am I doing? How do I navigate this? So that's when we started to do, okay, guys, we're going out for dinner, and it's just the three of us going out for dinner, and we're going out for dinner to talk about business, but we're not doing it at your kitchen table. We're not doing it at my kitchen table. We're not doing it with the kids where tension, everything else. We're going for a social thing as parents and child to talk about the future in a neutral place.
So this very first step you're talking about, Stephen, is where I hear from a lot of people, I can't even get the conversation started with my parents. And so from my perspective, I hear from two sides of the conversation, by the way. I hear about children, 40, 50-year-old children, by the way. We still call them children, who are trying to have the conversation with their parents. What's that?
I'm 44. I still behave like a child.
Still behave like a child, just a child with a beard, which is awkward.
An annoyingly gray beard.
Just wait until that gray starts marching south, buddy. It's horrible. Then the other conversations I have are with the parents or the founders who are talking about their kids' inability or their lack of confidence in their kids to take over. So this conversation that you're talking about right now is going to be very valuable to a lot of people. That you guys went down this road where it felt like nuclear explosion was going to happen. And then you came back and said, let's go for dinner. Break that down for us a little bit more so that somebody hearing you can understand what they can do in their own family situation to make that big first meeting start.
So really, it had to start, and it did start with not pulling it out at a tense conversation. It's actually, leaving it for a day or two. If you've had an argument or something, leave it settle, leave it kind of, the emotions subside a little bit. And then coming back in, and as the next generation coming back in with pure, I guess, patience and humility, and saying, look, I want to talk to you now. Like, maybe not, if you want to use these words, but look, I need to talk to you as your son right now, because this is what I see happening, and I don't want this to happen. This is the last thing I want.
Yeah.
But I can see it going to this point because we're at this impasse, because you and I are not looking at this thing from the same perspective. We're not looking at the potential of the business in the same way. We're not looking at the current structures, or we're looking at it, I want to change because I can see how the things need to change. And you're looking at it going, I have built this and I'm not risking it. And there's a different mindset psychologically. So the business that I have now is we do personality profiling. So we were in a lucky scenario.
Oh, fantastic.
Kind of a lucky thing. So
you already knew
profiling. So we knew a little bit about how all this works, but I mean, the cobbler's son has no shoes kind of thing. Like, we knew all this, but we were still getting head up in all of this because we were in the moment.
Can we do like right now we need to insert that record scratch sound.
Okay. Yes.
So you actually understand personality profiling. So, and we should take a second here, Stephen, if you understand it, I'll get you to explain to the listeners what that is, because I believe it's an extremely powerful tool for coming at the conversation.
I'm Irish, so I don't necessarily have to understand it to talk about it, but yes, I do understand it.
Well, I'm Dominic and I'm the same. But all joking aside, that is an interesting tool, and it's a tool. Anytime you have a tool, you have a toolbox, and you can't just walk around with a hammer and think everything is a nail. Not everything can be solved with one solution. There's multiple tools, but this is an interesting tool. And so people listening right now, if you're in this situation that Stephen's talking about, whether you're the parent or the child, whether you're the brother or the brother-in-law or the sister-in-law, whatever you are, what I think we're about to talk about is very important, because it helps us understand how people see the world, the words they use, and the words they would never use when they create a sentence and when they think. So with that segue, Stephen, can you tell us what do you call it personality profiling or behavioral assessments?
I use personality profiling because more people understand what that is. But behavioral assessments is, if we take it and look, let's as a complete aside from generational stuff for a sec, your personality is simply, there are lots of academic terms for it, but your personality is essentially your consistency in behavior. That's all your personality is. Your predictable consistency in behavior. Your behavior, if we take a step back from that, behavior is everything we do, how we what we say, how we behave, how we physically arrive in a room, whether we're extroverted, introverted, sarcastic, all this kind of stuff. All of that is based on really four things: our biases, our perspectives, our beliefs, and our habits. And those four things, they make up what's called the internal frame of reference. We all have this. And we all need this to evolve the way that humans have evolved. We've needed all these things. Things like habits are formed in a different part of the brain. And there was a study of a guy who lost all of his short-term memory, can still do habits. So it proved that habits were formed in a different part of the brain. He couldn't remember what happened in a 20-minute conversation, but he could still walk around the block because he'd done it 100 times.
Right.
So the way that we do things, the way that we approach a situation, the way that we approach a problem, what we've gone in the past, like our perspectives, our beliefs, our habits, and our biases, that informs every decision we make.
Right.
We can get into a conversation. I mean, biases is a hot topic at the moment. Biases are, as human beings, as we've evolved, we had to very, very quickly figure out, is this person going to eat me or is this person going to be in my tribe? We had to figure that out. So we had to have these labels, and that's the way the human brain works. The problem arises when we don't address these biases and we just say that bias is the way it is. So that's when we have problems. But we all have these, and we all have different perspectives. So if you change your perspective, or you change a habit, or you change a belief, or you change, I can't remember the habit, belief, perspective, and habit, belief, perspective, and bias. If you change one of these, you change your behavior, which changes your personality. Yeah. So having those conversations, understanding where the current generation's perspectives are, where they're, I'm not going to get into multi-generational biases. And
well, let's take it down to your parents. Like how closely aligned was your behavioral style and your dad's or your mom's?
So my father and I would be fairly similar in that we would both,
which can cause a lot of friction, right? When you're both the same. Yeah.
So we would have similar mindsets, and we're both strategic thinking. We both kind of our big ideas. I'm kind of higher on the aesthetic side, so I'm more in the marketing and the visuals, whereas he's more in the idea and probably a little bit more idea implementation, idea generation. Yeah. So I'm more idea generation. So for me and him, like I'd be coming up with all these crazy ideas, but my natural thing is I'm generally pretty shit at implementing a lot of these things. I need people around me. I need the process people. I need the
details people.
Orientated people. My mother is a very detail orientated person. So like the reason that they worked well together is because that they counterbalance each other all the time, but they've grown up in the business and grown the business by graft. Whereas I was coming in and going, okay, well, the business is here. It's built. It has a solid foundation. I now want to grow on that. So I want to invest in this technology. And they're like, well, that's really expensive to get those interactive whiteboards in all the classrooms. That's a lot of money going out when it could be this. But I'm seeing it as, yes, but we're going to be able to sell the fact that we have the best technology. We're going to be able to actually have a much richer experience in the classroom. We're going to ultimately spend less on textbooks and blah, blah, blah. And that friction and that tension for us, that was one of the things that we argued about. The other one for me, I wanted to get a lot more selective in who we were working with and the types of courses that we were providing. I felt we needed to cut a lot of courses instead of just saying yes to anybody who had money. Yeah. Or potentially had money, because a lot of the time they didn't then have the money. So becoming much more selective. But again, the perspective of my folks growing the business was, if they have money, we need the money, we will put the course on. So we will take all
comers. Take all comers.
As opposed to what I want to do was really not niche down, but be selective in the lanes that we were playing in to make it as feasible as possible.
Got it. So what I'm learning from you is, even though you guys are behavioral assessment or personality profiling experts, you still had to sit back and drink your own Kool-Aid and understand. Did you sit down and map it out and say, my dad's behavior is like this, his style is like this, my mom's style is like that, and mine is like this, and adjust your words, adjust your phrases, adjust your approach? Because so I would be very similar to you. I'm a very ideas-oriented person, very outgoing. I'm a teller, not an asker. I'm extroverted, not introverted, right? So if I'm going to sit down in that conversation, just based on what we've learned from you today, I would go into this and say, okay, my dad is a creative person, but also an implementer. So when I talk to him, I have to give him the room to talk to me about implementation. I have to ask him about implementation. I have to give him the idea and get him to give me the three best. Here's what we need to do next, to help it be his idea, instead of me just saying, here's what I want you to do. Here's how it's going to go. Because that's all that's going to do is lead to friction.
So yes. The other thing, that because they were kind of high on aesthetic stuff, both of them kind of wanted the look and feel of stuff. So instead of going in and just talking about the ethereal ideas, which would always be bouncing around my head, I would go in with either a PowerPoint or at least some kind of a mind map that I could walk them through where I want to do this, and I think then there's a market for this, and explain in numbers why I think there's a market for this.
Perfect.
This is the size of that demographic.
The logic.
This is the size, because detail-orientated logic stuff, but also partly showing I've done my sorry, I don't know. Am I allowed to swear in your podcast?
You are now.
In America, you call it cussing. In England, they call it swearing or cursing. In Ireland, we just call it talking. So
for me, I just mark the episode explicit and tell people you've sworn a couple times, which is fine. I like it. It's like a spice for me. It makes the dishes taste better. So you're good. Just be you.
So I've done my homework. I know what I'm talking about. I'm not just flying around kind of going, oh, let's do this. And I don't have regard for what the company has the potential to do. I'm not being disrespectful to the history that you guys have built up, or in any way diminishing the work that you've done. What I want to see is, where can we go from here?
Sure.
And for my folks, especially when it came to some of the digital stuff, it's not the world they grew up in. Like my parents are really forward thinking. Like, they both use computers and used computers for a long time and taught themselves how to touch type and were doing all this stuff, but they haven't grown up with it the same way as that we would have from a certain age, or my kids have from.
I was going to say, your kids would be laughing if they heard this conversation, because you don't understand TikTok. And anybody listening might laugh and say, TikTok, that's so old. We don't use that anymore.
Well, yeah. That's a whole different conversation. But so almost explaining, going back to a bit of basics in that and explain to them, like, this is it. And okay, so Google is like the golden pages, like the directory, but you can also have your newspaper articles, and actually putting it in a way without patronizing, because the last thing I wanted to do was kind of make my parents feel that I thought that they were stupid. They've built this they've built this amazing business. They're not idiots.
Yeah.
But they just haven't grown up in the world that I've grown up in. So they don't have the same perspectives that I do. They don't have the same just easy access to this stuff that I do.
Yeah.
So having that really helped, but also really driving home the fact that, look, we're family. We are family. We want to continue this. I want to continue this. I want to adapt. Like, I don't necessarily want to follow blindly what you guys built 30 years ago, because we've either hit that point or we need to adapt because the world has moved on.
Reinvention.
So, it really comes back to that second point that I have of what got you here is not going to get me there. And understanding that we need to work together to take what you've got and what you've built along with what I can do to get us all to the next level.
Yeah. And does that still fall under, because you mentioned 5 Ps and I feel like I took you off it. Are we still inside of purpose, or have we?
So purpose. So the 5 P, the purpose is, the first one is, the beehive. What is it that we're trying to accomplish? What is it we're trying to do? The next P then is pick. So sometimes in succession planning, like, who's the right person? So who is the right person in a family business? Sometimes the P and the first two Ps, the purpose and the pick, they happen at the same time, or they happen in reverse order. Like the example you said, somebody has Jones and Sons, and register that business when their wife is 3 months pregnant. Like, it's with the first child. So it's like the pick has already happened.
Yeah.
Sometimes that happens, and the pick happens kind of as well as the purpose, or they're so intertwined. Couple of things. So I've great friends in Spain who are 3 kids, grew up in a family business in manufacturing. The eldest son, which was traditionally and typically the one that is tapped to be the next leader, said, I don't want any of that stuff. I'm quite happy to be a manager in the company. I'm okay. I want my work-life balance. I'll do my 8 to 6, whatever. Not interested in any of the other stuff. So then, turn to the daughter. The daughter was like, I'm the accountant. I'm not the risk taker. I'm happy to do all the process stuff, but I'm not going to be coming up with marketing plans and driving the business on. The youngest son is the one that wants the entrepreneurial life, the one that wants to drive the business on. So the older brother and the older sister essentially are working for the younger brother now as the heir apparent to the empire.
Yeah, very interesting.
So very interesting, but also not uncommon. And this is where the pick is really important. And if we have, especially if we have more than one person in a generation that feels either they want it, or that they're the best person for it, or you might have somebody who feels that they're entitled to it and just will kind of milk it and not grow it. Whereas the second brother or sister can actually go, you know what, I love this and I can see where I can drive this on. So figuring out, again, from a personality point of view, what is it we're trying to accomplish and who's the best person to get us even in the next 10 years. So I had a conversation with a friend of mine who, his son, he's very much the traditional CEO out there getting business, growing the business, growing things. And his son, not interested, not really all that extroverted, quite an introverted kid, but very process driven, really good on numbers, really good on figuring out routines, processes, and running the operations of the business. Really good at it.
Good.
So we had a conversation because he was worried. He was like, well, what am I going to do? So we had this conversation and we came up with the idea of he's going to, when the kid is ready to come into the business full time, he's going to employ an external CEO for 10 years.
Yeah.
And he's going to go, okay, Mr. CEO, you're some external gun for hire. A lot of these very, very capable people. And go, okay, for the next 10 years, you're going to grow this business from 3 million to 12 million or whatever is the number that they've said. You're going to get paid an obscene amount of money to do so.
Yeah.
You're going to work side by side with my son as the COO. And then once we get up to that point and the business is sustainable and can tick over, and then it becomes a machine to run instead of to constantly have to grow at 10, 20% every year, you're going to get a golden parachute. You're going to get another wad of cash and you're going to go and be a hired gun for somebody else. We're going to thank you profusely and you're going to have had a great time and you're going to have a great thing on your CV. Then my son is going to be the COO and he's going to
operationally run it with his skills
and operationally run it from there on. You think of like the Tim Cook into Apple, like Apple, not really all that, not a great inventive company at the moment, but by God, they're doing well.
Yeah. So that's an interesting perspective where that father is saying, look, my son's superpower is operations and process. Let's bridge that gap. and make the company one that runs on operations and process so that he can take it over.
Exactly.
But
again, so this comes back to and we've touched on this about the first generation, the second generation, the first generation not letting go.
Yeah.
It comes back to, again, what got you here won't get them there. But the first mindset that I really want family businesses to understand is this idea of going from the hero of your story to the mentor of the next generation story. So
wow, that's a good one.
In every hero's journey, every novel, there's a book called The Hero of a Thousand Faces, and it's basically the same hero's journey that happens thousands of times over. Every movie that we see, Hollywood blockbuster. Yeah,
it's a storyline trope. The hero's journey is one of the 7 different types of stories, right?
Exactly. But the hero's journey is at the very beginning, before after the status quo. There's a call to action, and then there is always a trinket, a mentor, a sage, some kind of being or doodad that helps the hero in the special world. So in The Matrix, it was Neo. In Star Wars, it's Yoda. It's Dumbledore and Harry Potter. Like all of these people have this sage. Yeah. More often than not, that mentor is somebody who has already been on their own hero's journey and has come back to help the next generation. And that is vitally important. I mean, mentorship and coaching has been around for generations, and it's inherent in families. Parents mentor their kids. They parent their kids. When you've been the entrepreneur on that journey, you need to come back to come out of the special place, to come out of the entrepreneurial world. You don't have to be out of it and retire.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
But to then go from being the hero of your journey to being the mentor of the next generation's journey. And that's how we ensure succession. And it's really important for the current generation to do that. And if they can't get it, give them my details and I'll explain to them why it's so important.
Yeah, well, we're definitely going to. There's 2 reasons now to get your details to people. One is you understand this behavioral profiling, personality profiles, and then also on succession planning. Let me do this for a second, because you mentioned something a little bit earlier that I think is important. And I want to switch perspectives, because it feels like we've been talking a lot about the kids, talking to the parents. But if you're a parent and you are looking at your future with the company, and you go away for a coffee, you sit down, you write all your kids' names on the page, and you think, how am I, at some point, reality is coming. I don't want to be rude or impolite, but there's a ticking clock on all of us, on you, Stephen, on me, on everybody. It's unfortunate, but it's real. Well, I can either ignore that or I can take action. If I choose to take action and say, I want to set my company up for the future, how do I set things up systematically in my company so that we are prepared for that future? And I guess what I mean is, how do I train my kids to be leaders? How do I put systems in place so they can take over? What's the functional thing I do in the beginning in the company that one day everybody looks back on and says, geez, I'm glad dad did that. I'm glad mom did that, because now we're here. Give us a couple of those tips if you've got them.
So partly it's about the purpose. What are we ultimately trying to do with the business? What wrong in the world are we trying to right? What is it that we are doing? I mean, we're in construction. Are we building homes? Are we building apartments? Are we fixing roof? Like, what is it that we're doing? And then how can we grow that? After a while, it becomes not just a technical thing for growth. There also has to be an idea for somebody to be able to move into new technologies, whether if it's roofing and it's solar tiles or whatever it is to be open to this.
That's a good example. Yeah.
Who is it? Who's the strategic thinker? And do we need a strategic thinker right now? Do we need to actually say, okay, over the next 10 years, what we need to do is embed. So actually, Joanna is the real process-driven person. So maybe what we need to do is to create an agreement that for the next 10 years, she's going to be in charge. And Johnny, who's the brother, is going to be the marketing person. He understands the business and he's going to go out and be the strategic thinker. And then when we get to a point that maybe we need a strategic thinker leading the way until we piggyback again. I mean, that can be a conversation to be had. It's a bit unorthodox to have different CEOs swapping positions, but hey, it's family. Family do weird things. Yeah. So having that purpose, what is it we're trying to do? And then the pick, who is it? Who's the best person to see us through this 5 to 10 years, the next 5 to 10 years?
How do you feel about, let's talk about my business. Let's use my business as an example. How do you feel about me saying to my son and my daughter, listen, I want you to come and work in the family business, but before you do, I need you to put in 5 years or 3 years outside the family business.
Yeah.
Oh, you just did the hand gesture. So what do you think that's a good idea? Have you seen it work? What are the benefits? What are the drawbacks to that? Because there's got to be some negatives as well.
So there's three. So the keynote that I talk about is the hero to mentor is what got you here won't get them there. And then the third one is internal and external development. So the Celts in Ireland had this down pat. So
I knew you were going to bring up the Celts in Ireland. It's just a matter of time.
I mean, I brought up Guinness within 30 seconds.
Okay, I'm sorry. Internal. Say that again. Internal
and external development.
Okay, thank you.
So the Celts had this brilliant idea that all of the clans would have their royalty. Like clans were the towns, and they'd have a couple of farms, a couple of everything else. Once the kids of the royalty and the kind of the nobles in the clans came to age, kind of 14, 15 years of age, males and females, they would be shipped off to a friendly clan. And that clan would be responsible for teaching those kids Breton law, farming, music, business, all this kind of stuff, the stuff that they needed to learn. They would have the internal development and the internal knowledge from growing up in their own clan, growing up in their own environment. But then they would be sent off to somebody else to be trained by them to then be returned. Now, I have a 14-year-old daughter. The idea of sending her off to somebody for a couple of years.
Isn't that crazy? Yeah, just crazy.
The flip side is that when their kids come of age, you got to look after them. So I don't know about
that's true. Yeah.
But this was really common practice in the Celts, and it was called Fosterage, where you would go, and Fosterage today comes from this idea of welcoming kids into your home. But it started off being you're going to take them for a finite amount of time, a couple of years, and your responsibility is to teach them these things. So as when they come back, there's twofold. One, they have an education from somewhere else as well as what we've taught them.
Perspective.
But two, there's obviously stronger ties between these clans and everything else.
Yeah.
So a lot of family businesses now, they will say there's two ways into the business. And this is how I started. So you can either come in at the bottom and work your way up. You're not, just because you have an Instagram account, doesn't mean you're our marketing manager. So you got to come in at the bottom.
Just because you have our family last name doesn't mean you're immediately VP of everything.
Absolutely. And I think that's the worst thing that you could do.
I agree with you 100%.
Or you go and you work for somebody else and you work your way up a ladder. In that company, then you come across at the same level, not higher. Now, there are other things. You can have family trust, so you can have different things where the family can benefit. That's a whole different.
And let me just interrupt for a second. You made a great point there. There's a difference between being a shareholder in a family trust or in a corporation and an employee. They are not the same thing. You can be an employee of a company, but it doesn't mean you're a shareholder. You can be a shareholder, but it doesn't mean you're an employee. Though there's an invisible line there between shareholder and employee. They're different things. So anybody listening, please understand, just because you've got the family last name does not mean you're automatically vice president. Just because you have some shares in the family business does not mean you automatically have a job at the business. I know right now some people are angry and they're going to unsubscribe. I wanted to lose those people anyways. You got to have that forward vision.
So, I mean, absolutely. One of the things that I heard recently, and I thought it was lovely, is that somebody who was growing up in a family business, they wanted their kids to be, what was it? It'll come back to me. She phrased it beautifully, and I wrote it down. And I said, I'm not going to forget it, but sure enough, I did forget it. That they wanted them to have, they wanted them to feel ownership, but not feel entitled. That they wanted them to make sure that they have a sense of ownership, they have a sense of duty, but they're not entitled to a damn thing.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really lovely of having that mindset in the business. So yes, the Fosterage thing of, if you're coming in the family business, you come in at the low end and you work your way up, because then you've come up through the ranks of the business. Normally you put in the hours, you put in the sweat, because the last thing, if you come in and you start telling people who have been there for 20 years, oh no, do this.
Oh yeah.
You've just been in the business for 6 weeks. I'm going to swear again. Fuck.
Trouble.
It's like,
trouble. So many problems, you know.
So going out and coming in, or coming in as low as possible and working your way up, they're the only two ways to do it properly, really.
Right. But it's not automatically handed to you that you're going to be the leader of a certain department.
Now, the other thing that I think is shouldn't be handed to you automatically is that you shouldn't just get shares in the company. When we talk about employee and shareholding, like, you got to put your skin in the game. You've got to. So I bought both businesses. Now, I'll be honest. If we'd sold them on the open market in proper M&A, the value of the business would probably be higher. I didn't necessarily pay the top of the market rate.
Sure.
But I paid into the business. I had that ticking over through the business.
But you're also a strategic buyer. You're a strategic buyer at that point, and it did not take your family 3 years to do a transaction with somebody who was actually going to complete on the transaction. Well, yes. Stephen, as you might imagine, I deal with that a lot. Yeah, I'm dealing with two family business transitions right now, where the family is selling, and in one of the cases, they've gone, she's over 16 months with a potential buyer, and now that potential buyer might not go through. So basically, all they've done is hold up that company for 16 months from making changes, implementing things they wanted to, opening the kimono, as they say, and it's an awkward situation. You have to do it.
Really,
you have to do it. You have to go through the process to understand the process. Listen, for our process people, I used a P word. They are going to be going insane right now, because so far we've got purpose and pick. We've only got two. And so just to quell the behavioral styles that need process and completion.
So once we have the purpose and the pick, then we know what we're doing. We know who we're doing it with. Then it's prepare. So this is where we spend as much time as possible working hand in hand, where the current generation acts as the mentor to the next generation. And then over time, ideally, this is at an absolute maximum, this is 5 years.
Okay.
But I mean, unfortunately, you talked about the ticking clock. Sometimes the current generation, unfortunately, from one day to the next is no longer with us, and the next generation has to step in. That's chaotic. That throws everything into turmoil. So it can be done overnight. It's less than ideal in any.
It's not. That's not a succession plan.
Having a process where people are taking on more and more responsibility on a year by year basis and swapping over. So over anywhere from 1 to 5 years.
Yeah.
We're taking on more and more responsibility over those 5 years, making the decisions and having the conversations. So you possibly through this organization, I got to speak to Rolf Schromgens from Trivago, for example. Are you familiar with Trivago?
I am. Yeah, I am familiar with Trivago, but I wasn't at that presentation.
So Rolf is no longer the CEO. He's the chairman of the organization, but he built the organization. It wasn't a family business. But he said that over the 3 years that he was coaching in all of the people that were taking over the executive team, he said the best investment he ever made was spending one-on-one time helping them to prepare to take over the business. He's a big advocate, and I fully agree with him. Once you start stepping out, you can't reach back in, because once you reach back in, you're going to fuck up everything, because you don't have the context, you don't have the all of the backstory. All you're doing is looking at a little bit of what you see as the top line. Yeah. So you've got to spend as much time coaching your people, mentoring your people, and prepping your people. They're going to make the decisions, but you need to have given them all the information that you've gleaned in the last 20, 30 years in your business, helping them with the values, how we make decisions, why we make the decisions we make, but ultimately the decisions are theirs. But spending that time preparing that person to take over.
Yoda and Dumbledore. If we look back at your hero's journey, which is a great overlay to this whole thing, those are really, really good examples of that. It's that wise other person who's there. Yeah. Okay. So purpose, pick, prepare. What's number 4?
Number 4 is one which is the current generation, only they can do it. It's the promote. So there's 2 meanings to the word promote. One is obviously to promote them to the position, to give them the job and let them take over.
Yeah.
And actually let them do it. Give them the role, give them the opportunity, and let them run with it. They're going to make mistakes. They're going to stumble. But the second meaning of promote is to act like a cheerleader in the organization. To be, no, Junior's making the right decision. No, I'm not answering that. You got to talk to Junior about it.
What a great point you're raising. So
Because
that comes up all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just going to I'm just going to ask your advice on something. It's not, you're not asking my advice. You don't like what Junior said, and you want me to.
You're shopping the
undermine it.
answer.
No.
Yeah.
Go.
Yeah.
That way. Talk.
I need to be able to say that's a Stephen question, not a Dominic question.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. I have to, and that takes a lot of ego, by the way, because I think one of the things, and I've recognized this even in my own businesses as I've grown them, is the higher up in the organization I go, when I start to build a very successful business, I'm not needed as much. I have a lot of days where by 10:30, I'm like, what am I going to do now? I better stick around or look like I'm working, but I'm not needed much. So somebody comes in and my ego goes, oh, okay, they need me. This is a really big question. No, it's not a big question. Somebody's shopping an answer. Yeah. I'm glad you brought that one up.
So, and it is really, really important. If you have a disagreement, you're completely entitled to have a disagreement. You're still family. You're still involved in the business. You're still overseeing stuff. All of that happens behind closed doors.
Thank you for saying that.
You agree 100% with whatever Junior is saying.
Yeah. So let's hit that point again, because this is important. So we're talking about I'll use the word parent and child. So if the parent, the mentor, disagrees with the decision or the path that the child is taking, the one who's taking over in public, I agree 100%.
Yeah.
But then behind closed doors, we're going to have a chat. Is that what you're saying?
We might have a very tense conversation about the fact that you just did something stupid, but
it's behind closed doors.
Behind closed doors, and then it is up to Junior to fix it. It's not, and you have to then work with Junior. You have to work with the child, the next generation, to go, okay, if they start to agree, go, oh, maybe I did mess up. Okay, how are we going to fix that so you can present the solution? It's not the current generation going in and going, okay, I disagreed with him, so we're doing this now. It's how are they going to do it?
Yeah, just because we mentioned Dumbledore and Yoda, I thought I'd use another TV reference. Not doing that is the basis for every good soap opera.
Okay. Yeah.
Right? I mean, because the parent keeps reaching back in and causing havoc in the background while the child is trying to run the business as best they can. And there's always this tension. So it doesn't matter what TV show you're watching. That's always happening. But that makes for good TV. Good TV is not good reality.
Well, we don't want drama in our business.
No, should be low drama, high profit.
No.
Right. Okay. So we've got purpose, pick, prepare, promote. 5 is
patience.
Oh, you see how you did that to me there?
Yeah.
You made me.
I made you wait.
You made me wait.
Patience. Because look, it's the same thing. It's a different way of doing things. Both people have to find their groove. They have to find their rhythm. And we're going to lose patience with each other because we're family, whether we're working with each other or not. Mm-hmm. So having that patience and that remembering why we're doing all this will help us.
And of course, I'm a business coach, so I'm used to seeing these things and trying to simplify it. But behind all of these things comes communication. Like I can't do this alone. If I'm your son and you're the father and there's going to be a handover happening, I can't do this if I'm not communicating respectfully and properly to you. And you can't do it unless you're communicating respectfully and properly with me as well. I think that's behind all of this is open communication, which means what people may not want to hear, having regular meetings with a purpose. Mm-hmm. They're not just to visit. They're not just to rip somebody a new one.
Absolutely. And the boardroom table and the kitchen table have to be 2 separate pieces of furniture.
Oh, man. I don't know if you can see I had a family business, Stephen, where we would have a conversation at the boardroom table. And it was all, even at the table, we discussed, this will not leave the room. This is what we're talking about here. This is for the business. At the end of the day, I'd get in the car and I'd start driving home. My phone would ring and it would be my mom, who was not involved in the business. One of my cousins had already called his mom, who then called her sister-in-law, which was my mom. And they had a fight. And then I got a phone call. And I'm like, we had that meeting 3 hours ago. And I'm explaining to my mom why she doesn't know something big that went on in the company. And I'm like, this is insanity. We can't run a company like this. But it caused so much strain and stress. It was just unnecessary drama. And actually, I should say, I view that as immaturity on the part of the other person. Yeah.
And again, I mean, it comes back, I suppose, to to prepare, and maybe it's not just the current people that we're preparing, it's also how to feed information back to the non-family members, like how that cousin fed back to his or her mother or whatever it is, like having these conversations of how we're doing things. And again, it comes back to the personality bit of some people need time to process. And you find this in business meetings. There's somebody who'll shoot from the hip and we'll make these decisions and we'll all be great. And there's somebody in the corner that's kind of quiet and not saying anything. And everyone's doing, they're such an introvert or whatever. But they'll come back in 2 days' time and go, you know what? We didn't think about this, and this.
Yeah, very valuable.
They just need the time to process that. And they don't think the same way as everyone else does. And they're usually the ones that are able to see the icebergs.
Yeah, that's a great point. It quite often takes me a long time to recognize that person is being quiet for a reason. At the same time, I need them to speak up and tell me.
Yeah, and again, that's but it has to be a day or two later, and an understanding that, okay, we're going to have our big board meeting, or if we're in a smaller family business, like we're going to have our management meeting today. But look, Johnny, we have our standing meeting at 4:30 tomorrow afternoon as well for you to process. Not publicly belittling, but just an understanding. This is how you process it. Come back to me then.
Yeah. Yeah, you're going to want to think about this. Well, this actually is a really nice segue to you understand personality profiling. How important is, I call them behavioral assessments, but I'm not a professional in it. I use the tool. How important is it for me to understand, let's say I'm the child and you're the father. How important is it for me to clearly understand your behavioral style before I start having this conversation about changes I might want to implement or opinions I might want to voice?
So there's two ways to assess personality. There's the implicit and the explicit. Explicit is where we do assessments and we fill in questionnaires and we have scores on charts and things. The other is implicit, where we observe things and we see, okay, well, if I mention a rival football team or something, he's going to get really annoyed. So I'm definitely not going to talk to him about it then. So there are things that we know growing up, and you know yourself growing up. I want to go out on Friday night. Who do I ask? Mom or dad? Who's the soft touch for going out? And who's the soft touch for home? So we know these things implicitly.
Yeah.
But having an understanding in a business context of how people react to that kind of stuff, even just taking a couple of days, a couple of weeks to, instead of being in it, observing, can give you a huge insight into, okay, yeah, on a Thursday afternoon is when the payroll stuff comes out, and dad's always really tense because he's going through the numbers, he's been working through these, and okay, we have enough this week and we need to invest this. So maybe that's not the time to do it.
Right.
Maybe a Friday morning and say, hey, Dad, look, can we go for a walk, or can we go
grab
out of the office? I want to talk to you about something. Grab a coffee and go for a walk in the park, The other thing, and I used to do this with my own father, is walking the dog or going for a walk. It's the least confrontational way of having a conversation, because you're not looking at each other. You're both looking in the same direction physically.
Yeah,
you're both moving and walking in the same direction. And you can have conversation. When you need to drive home a point, you can look to the other person, but you're not locked in. You're free to kind of think about what the other person is saying and kind of digest it.
It's a different environment. It's a great way to do things. Yeah. And walking the dog is great. Now, if you don't have a dog, this is not the reason to get one, but.
Yeah, but it's also not the reason to steal somebody else's. Walk into the neighbor. Hi, Mary, can I borrow your dog for an hour? I'm having an argument with my dad. If we need to go sort it out.
Yeah. So that's actually a great point. And I hope people are taking away a lot of these ideas, maybe going for a walk, maybe thinking about the best time of day of week to have that conversation when your dad, we'll just keep using that example, your dad is not preoccupied with purchase orders or receivables. But also, if you're the child, let's say I'm the child again, Stephen, and we don't have systems in place to have this communication. We don't have a regular accounting meeting. We don't have a regular forecasting meeting. The first thing to put in place, I would think, is some of these systems, because it just makes it easier to have these conversations where everybody knows we talk every Tuesday at 2. So it's no big deal to have a meeting Tuesday at 2, because we always have a meeting Tuesday at 2. But if you never have meetings and suddenly you ask for a meeting Tuesday at 2, people come in like porcupines, they're back up against the tree. Like, what's going on? Who wants something from me? That's not what we want. We want no drama.
Yeah. So we actually started this when I lived in Spain for a year, the year that I decided to buy the second family business. I'd been living in Spain for a year. My wife is Spanish. And for the 2 years before that, I put in a lot more of these meetings, the scheduled one-to-one meetings, the weekly scheduled meetings, to make sure that everyone's on the same page. There's communication flowing through the organization. And it was one of the things that really helped with this whole process of making things run more smoothly.
Love it. Yeah. So you use that tool as well.
Yeah.
Stephen,
go ahead.
Yeah.
I know we are probably way over time, but I'm really
no, this is a good conversation. I'm loving it. So.
But you were asking about the kids and getting the kids involved. And we were talking about the internal and the external stuff. The other thing that I share with people is there's two things that I think are really important for the current generation that want to get their kids involved or are not sure how to get their kids involved. One thing is, and I've noticed this time and time again, if you're coming home, if you're the current generation, you're the dad, you're the mom, you're running the business, sometimes the only place that you can vent about those idiot suppliers or those just greedy employees, whatever it is that you're complaining about, is at the kitchen table over dinner. And you're just venting, not because you actually feel that they're the devil or anything like that. It's the only place that you have. You can't do it in work. You can't do it with your buddies.
Yeah.
So your kids grow up and all they know of your business is that place sounds like hell on earth.
I see where you're going with this. You're right. Yeah. It sounds like a disaster.
And then what happens is usually kids, they when they become teenagers, they don't have a summer job. They work in the family business and they discover elements of the job. But like, actually, this is kind of fun, or this is cool, or I like this, or I like that. So what I would encourage you to do, especially if your kids are young, is to actually start talking about the good things that happen in work as well. And the reason that we set up a business, the reason that we work for ourselves, the positives of entrepreneurship. Otherwise, they're just going to be fed this vitriol forever and never going to want to join the family business.
Negativity. Yeah. Well, I know this sounds self-serving, but listening to podcasts with your kids in the car about business, about success, about ways that people who are building wealth and legacy think is different than the news. The news always talks about the negative. It's like you said, it's where we could talk about this dog ran away and unfortunately we found out it was smuggled by this dog smuggling ring. All the horrible things make it to the news, but the good stuff rarely does. And when it does, it's this special feature. But if you want to expose your kids and the people in your family to positive things, then listen to positive podcasts or listen to positive audios that help them see the world in an ongoing way that they go, okay, no, I can see how that works. Or it just gets it in their head that there's some positive to running a business. That's a great point.
Absolutely. So the last thing that I want to leave you with is this idea of, so we've all heard in our businesses, I mean, I don't know how many things you have on the go at the moment, but people have their side hustle. So they have the little thing on the side that makes them a little bit of money, whether it's holiday money, drinking money, whatever it is. What we can do with our family businesses to encourage our next generation to come in is to create an inside hustle. So what's a project? What's a product, a service, a new way of doing something that is separate from the core business, but can use the resources of the business, can learn the culture of the business, can learn how things work in the business, but actually they have a little bit of freedom to make their mistakes. It's not going to collapse the business if they do something wrong. Yeah. So when I started doing summer programs when I was 18, 19, it was exactly that. If it lasted for a summer. So if I really messed up, I could stumble through for a couple of weeks and then regroup and do it again the next year. Yeah. But when we sold the business, that was about 25% of our gross revenue every year. So it grew to be a really, really important part of it. So if it goes well, it can be absorbed back into the main business. If it doesn't, you can let it off and you can see, okay, we learned something. What did we learn from that? What can we apply in other ways to our business? So having an inside hustle for the next generation.
It's funny you say that, and anybody who's listened to my show for a while will recognize the story of Jake. Jake is a hardscaper. So he does landscape construction. So when you're building an apartment complex, somebody has to make the berms and the flower pots and the concrete sidewalks in some cases, all of those features, right? Not necessarily planting the flowers, but making the features that the flowers go in. Okay. But his business, as he said, he goes, my business is kind of too small and I don't want to grow it for my son to take over, but my son wants to come in. And so just the simplest thing we put in place is that every time he submitted a bid, these are commercial bids, he attached a side letter that says, we'd like to do the lawn maintenance on this property as well. Well, we've got 10 no's in a row. No, 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 no. Yes. The first one was for a museum. So his son started doing lawn maintenance. Again, like you said, with the internal equipment, the internal systems and everything. Well, wouldn't you know it, that business really quickly grew to a $2 million run rate, $2 million a year in landscape maintenance, not hardscaping, which is one project, one and done, maintenance. So without knowing at the beginning what we were going to do, Jake and I came up with a plan that created this ongoing recurring revenue business for his son, who then came in, and really Jake gets to run his hardscaping business with his hardscaping crew, and the son has a corner of the shop where he maintains lawnmowers and the ride-ons and things like that. Perfect. Really, brilliant. Exactly what you're talking about there.
I love that.
Yeah, so crazy. Well, Stephen, man, you have a lot of knowledge in you and experience in having gone through two of these.
Well, I talk a lot. I'm Irish. I don't know whether one thing actually that my father always taught me from a young age is if you don't know the answer to something, make it up and make it sound good. So I wouldn't necessarily want everything I've said here today to be fact checked, but
no. I have known you in other circles, and I know that you're being extremely humble. If somebody wants to get in touch with you, and I know you're on the other side of the pond, as you say, but you deal a lot with North America anyways. How would somebody find you in this wide world?
So the easiest thing is successfulsuccession.com. That's my website. There's a lot of S's in there, but we're talking about succession. We want you to be successful, successfulsuccession.com. So that all of my details are there. My contact stuff is there. So if there's anything I can help you with, if there's any questions, or even just to ping me to say, what were those 5 Ps or whatever it is again. First of all, they should re-listen to your podcast, give you 5 stars and all the rest of it. Then contact me to get the list for the 5 Ps.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And anyone listening out there, if you have questions specifically about succession, which is passing the business on from one generation to the next, shoot me those questions. And if I, get some questions that are juicy enough, Stephen, maybe we can have you back again to discuss them, because this is a topic that's never, ever going to go away. Passing the business on to the next generation, doing it properly, having it succeed without the family falling apart. I mean, you came up with this title, Build a Killer Family Business Without Killing Your Family.
Yeah,
I think that says it all there.
I've seen it go the other ways, unfortunately, so many times, and it nearly did with me. And like the final part of this, and I was telling you this before. So it started with me being at the kitchen table going, I'm never going to be able to be in the same room as my family. We were not going to be able to see each other. We're not going to be able to talk to each other. So we're actually renovating my parents' house. So that's why I have a little bit of experience in your world at the moment, dealing with different contractors and electrical and things like that. We're going to be not only a multi-generational business, we're also going to be a multi-generational household. So we're moving back in my family home. We're renovating the downstairs for my parents to have a granny flat. It's a beautiful. We're getting the whole thing levels in case they need wheelchairs in the future. They don't now, thankfully, but the whole thing will be wheelchair accessible, their own kitchen. So it's connected house, but there's 2 kitchens, 2 living rooms, but we're all going to be living together. And I mean, if you had said that to me when I sat down on my kitchen table that day, I would have thought this is insane. There's no way. I mean, we're not going to be able to work together, to live together, to actually go on holidays together and really enjoy spending time with each other.
Yeah.
It's not possible. It's not feasible. I can't see it. Now I'm delighted that I get to do this, and I get to go to work, share in the success of my family, and I'm able to grow and productize some of the things that they've done and grow the business in a way that they haven't been able to, and they wouldn't be able to. And then I look at my kids, whatever they want to do, if they want to come into the business later, brilliant. Yeah. The last thing I'll leave you on is my argumentative side of things is that no family member should ever join a family business. That a family business should join the family member. So over the next 10 years, like, how am I going to adjust the business now? So as if one of my daughters wants to join what they're interested, what they're good at, how they're going to be successful, how can I grow that to have an inside hustle for them to try and run with and push that side of the business? And just having that knowledge lets me know that, look, we're going to give it a go and we'll see how we get on.
Love it. You're a great presenter. Thank you so very much for bringing this to us. I hope you know how much you're appreciated in this. I think we're going to have you back again, Stephen. I can't say when, but I know it's going to happen.
Pleasure, Dom.
Yeah. All right. Thanks. Have a great day.
Good. Thanks a million.
Okay. Bye-bye.